Well, hello. I am Ken Powell,
And I'm Nicholas Graham.
and here we are for a podcast. We've not done one for quite a while, and we've gone a bit snazzy because it's like Christmas and everything. So we've got to do something a bit special for that, don't we?
We have.
So we're doing our Christmas special, and we are thinking about what makes Christmas. And obviously, as per the subject matter of our podcasts, we are looking at a literary point of view, but we're stretching it. It's Christmas, and we can go for just that little bit extra and make sure that we do something a bit extra. So we're including things like movies in our list of what counts as literary. And the idea for this came up when Nick and I were chatting some while ago, thinking about why do some things really stick in our consciousness about Christmas and why do other things don't? And out of that, we started thinking, well, what is Christmas at all? And of course, what you might not realize is that Christmas has a very large literary origin, at least in terms of how we tend to think Christmas is done these days. So I'm kicking off with saying that there's three things really that makes Christmas, and two of them are definitely literary. The obvious one is A Christmas Carol, which everyone knows and loves, and Nick's going to share some thoughts about that in a moment. And we, of course, we have all the trimmings with that. We know all the feels that comes from A Christmas Carol. But the other one that people don't necessarily know is Washington Irving's Knickerbocker's History of New York, which is a parody of history books that were done at the time, which is in the 19th century. And in it, believe it or not, we get the idea of Santa Claus going down people's chimneys and delivering gifts because apparently nobody else could be bothered, so he decided he was going to have to do it. What it's doing in a history book, who knows? But it became immensely popular. And those two stories basically gave us much of our modern day Christmas. Throw into that Prince Albert's bringing over of the old German Christmas tree, and you've got all the trimmings that we expect to be part of Christmas today. It was not like that before Dickens and Irving and such like were doing their kind of thing. You had all sorts of different ideas for Christmas, including not doing Christmas at all, which at various different points in time was banned. And you had things like, for instance, Santa Claus being someone who boys and girls really did have to be scared of because he really would cart them off and they'd never be seen again, according to some traditions. So this is where we start off with Christmas. And of course, Christmas Carol is the one that we all know about, but why? Nick,
Well,
what's your
that's
thoughts?
really good question. You can't simply assume that something has been there all the time. But actually, weirdly, Christmas Carol is still almost 200 years, 180 years after its first publication, is still an incredibly central part of our experience of Christmas. Partly it's due to it being a ghost story, absolutely the greatest Christmas ghost story there is. And we've talked on this podcast in the past about how great ghost stories are and have explored that particular genre. And one of the things about ghost stories is that they tend to become incredibly popular when you're looking back into the past. Right, here's a Christmas quiz for you.
Oh no,
Ken.
I'll do badly at this.
Dickens was writing in 1843 A Christmas Carol, and he has the old what we think of now as the classic thing of Marley's ghost trundling around in chains and dragging lead weights and chains behind him. And you think most ghost stories, they originate in the Gothic in the 18th century, when the old religion is coming and tapping the Enlightenment on its shoulder and saying, you need to be scared. Life isn't all rational. Life isn't all cut and dried. There's actually unmanageable stuff here. So when you look back to ghosts, and particularly chained ghosts, which I have to say, when I first saw the film, or one of the many films of Christmas Carol, as a child, I was absolutely terrified by. But how far back do you think ghosts in chains actually go? There's a question for you.
Absolutely no idea. I would have always assumed it was to do with Christian theology about being in the chains of hell and getting ghosts
You
from
would
that.
think it was, wouldn't you? And you'd think, this is either a Renaissance thing or a medieval
Yeah.
You need to go much further back than
Wow.
that. There's a guy writing in the 120s AD called Pliny the Younger, and he writes a lot of letters. He's the guy who writes to the Emperor Trajan, saying he wants advice on all these pesky Christians who are knocking on his door, demanding that he martyr them and throw to the lions. And he doesn't really want to do this because he's a decent and humane guy. But in one of his letters, not the one about the Christian martyrs, he says, "And I heard about a house in Athens that is haunted by a ghost in chains who drags his chains around." Now, if that was a common thing almost 2,000 years ago, I should imagine it goes back a lot further than that. But when we think about the Christmas ghosts and Marley, we're actually tapping into a very old tradition. But that apart, what makes Christmas Carol such a fantastically resonant and brilliant experience? And if you look at the time and circumstance under which it's written, I think this accounts for some of the ghost stuff. We'll come to a bit more about why it's gone on and had such amazing longevity in a moment. Dickens was writing in 1843, in the middle of the most extraordinary social, political, and economic turmoil. The Industrial Revolution was in full fig and throwing up society, tearing it into bits, turning it around, and just wondering where the pieces fell. And the pieces fell into London. Britain at that time is in the process of depopulating the countryside and leaving behind the old, stable certainties of the agricultural life and throwing millions of people into enormous cities, specifically London, and into lives of absolute poverty and despair as they become the raw material, the fodder for the work of the Industrial Revolution. And what Dickens does in A Christmas Carol is give us this absolutely burningly angry story about why this has led to such appalling injustices. And he does it through the figure of Ebenezer Scrooge, who we all associate with Christmas, bar humbug, and like to think that he's a wicked old miser. Actually, A Christmas Carol is a story of one man's redemption and his realization that the life that he has been living is utterly wrong and needs to change. And again, this is happening in the 1840s in Britain. Europe is on the verge of social and political catastrophe and revolution. It's 5 years before the authorship of the Communist Manifesto. Dickens is a radical, but he is a liberal radical. He doesn't buy into socialism. What he believes very firmly is that society can get better gradually, and it's down to individuals to make their stand and do things differently. And he gives us Scrooge, a man whose sense of humanity has been withered by his obsession with money and the fact that he hoards it to himself. He doesn't send it out to work for the good of society more broadly. And what Dickens does with his story, I think this accounts for why it has become such a long-running popular thing. He does something very clever. He breaks up his story into 5 staves, he calls them, 5 acts. And when you look at it, it follows the absolute classic Hollywood story arc structure of a man who in need of redemption, conflict, crisis, his realization that he must change, and then a fantastically happy ending when he sends the turkey round to Bob Cratchit and his family. Incidentally, there is an element of the society that A Christmas Carol portrays that I think speaks very deeply to the society we are today. Cratchit, who is Scrooge's employee, is portrayed as the father of a family which is living in poverty and which is has appalling health problems. They have a small child who is virtually on death's door. And Scrooge will not help them at the beginning of the story. You've got to remember, Cratchit is an educated member of the middle class. He's a clerk in a counting house. He's one of the people who's supposed to be doing quite well out of the Industrial Revolution, but he is living a life of grinding and unremitting poverty, which he cannot improve without some sort of economic transformation. And that's what Scrooge eventually, when he's confronted with the supernatural and the long-term implications of the life that he's living, he changes and makes and resolves to become a better man and goes to the good. So it's something that speaks very deeply to, I think, our general experience of Christmas, that it's a time of pivot, a time of change. It's a time when we look to, values other than the rat race and the accumulation of wealth. Why has it been so popular? I think it's a lot to do with that 5-act structure, because it exemplifies it brilliantly. I mean, the 5-act structure in Hollywood films is, something that Hollywood scriptwriters have made a fortune out of writing books about how to do this and why and how it works. Just look at the legacy that Dickens brings us with A Christmas Carol. It was first adapted for the stage 6 weeks after its sell-out publication in February 1844, and has gone on to be, I think people have lost count of how many theatrical adaptations. There have been 25 screen adaptations of A Christmas Carol. 37 if you include the 12 animated features. The very 5 of those film adaptations were made before World War I. The very first one was made in 1901. I think I've lost count of the number of television versions of it there have been. I think it's 25 or 30, almost the same number. And people think of, the wonders of the Muppets' Christmas Carol, which we'll no doubt touch on later, and so on. I can remember being terrified as a small child of Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol, the Disney animated version. But the very first television adaptation of it was in 1943 in the United States. And you get the impression that people have said, we've got a new dramatic form here, whether it's cinema, TV, or whatever. What are we going to... first thing we need to do is adapt A Christmas Carol. And the reason that people have done that, I think, is that not simply that it speaks to absolutely the finest moral values that we carry about community and our responsibilities towards it, but also because it is such a crackingly good story that focuses upon one man's redemption and gives us a deeply optimistic outcome at the end of it. So A Christmas Carol, if you've not read it, if all you've seen is the Muppets' Christmas Carol, or even
pretty darn close to the original.
It's pretty damn close to the original, or even George C. Scott as Scrooge in the American TV adaptation in the 1980s, or most cherishably of all, Alistair Sim in the 1950s film adaptation, which incidentally included a galaxy of great British film and dramatic acting talent. If that's the only way you know Christmas Carol, I'd urge you go and get hold of Dickens' original. It's not a long or complicated or difficult read. It's an afternoon by the fireside with a good glass of malt whiskey and a deeply, deeply satisfying imaginative experience. And A Christmas Carol is certainly an important part of my Christmas, and I think you can now see why it has had such an incredibly long life. And I'm sure will continue to have a long life, because you can guarantee that as soon as somebody comes up with a new form of communication or a new dramatic format, somebody will be saying, "Hey, we ought to adapt
Christmas
Dickens' Christmas Carol and make it work in
Yeah.
this." So that's my
No, I
number
agree.
one Christmas highlight.
Yeah,
I think.
absolutely, and I agree with all your points. Though, and the only thing I would add to that is this: I think that it was, to a certain extent, the right writer with the right idea at the right time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would include from that, the early adaptations you were saying, kind of like the movie versions and things like that, coming in. I think of much the same way that our view of war changed with the advent of television, with these screens that were in people's front rooms for the first time ever, and we went from a very jingoistic, our boys at the front, to the horrors of war, which changed ultimately how governments perceive war, to a large extent. Obviously wars are still going on, but we go into wars much more gravely, I think, than we did 100 or 200
with
years
real
ago.
reluctance, and rightly so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and you can put not everything, of course, but you can put a large chunk down to the fact that those horrors of wars were brought right into our front room. In the same way, Dickens was immensely popular. I mean, he was a fantastic writer. He was a newspaper writer, of course, so these stories were being, pumped out every week. People were queuing up round the block kind of thing to get the newspaper, to get the latest chapter of Dickens. So just a monumental writer and popular writer of the time that stayed through long enough for radio adaptations. I'm sure there probably were, first of all, and then through to the television that has just kept it going. And now it's almost impossible to think of Christmas without that visualization of Jacob Marley's ghost and all the rest of it.
Bar humbug, you boy, what day is today? Or surely Tiny Tim will not die. I mean, so much of Dickens is deeply embedded in our subconscious anyway, but Christmas Carol, I think, preeminently so, and rightly so.
Yeah.
It demonstrates to perfection the theory of narrative arc, and in a work of fiction, in a way that I think is only comparable to the way Sophocles' Oedipus demonstrates Aristotle's perfect idea of what a tragedy ought to be. It literally is one of the greatest single works of fiction ever written, precisely because of the way it takes us through that story.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And funnily enough, just thinking that the whole idea of the aspects of it that have stuck with us, and we talk about people being a Scrooge and things like that. And the other day we haven't got our turkey yet, which we're kind of going, well, we need to do that. And my son, literally, who I don't think he's ever read it, but he certainly knows of it. He just says, "Oh, we don't need to worry about a turkey. We just need to open a window and call the first boy we see and say, 'Here's a shilling. Go and get me your finest goose,' or something of that kind of ilk." And it's like, that's just part of how we think of things, and part of our the way we joke about things as well. It's just kind of so much part of our language. It's not the only literature that's out there.
Yeah. What else have we got?
Well,
what's
a surprising amount. I've got a list.
Christmas. What's your list for Santa to bring for Christmas entertainment?
There's quite a few different things, and I have got a list here on my phone. So forgive me for kind of looking down at it a lot, because I can't remember all this, because there is an awful lot, including things that you might not think about at all, including the fact that Dickens wrote a short story called The Chimes, which is another Christmas thing, of which I must confess I don't know much about at all, other than the fact that he wrote it. And yet that hasn't made it through to us. Was it because Christmas Carol just overtook it, or is it just not as good? I mean,
I think it would be very difficult for anything to occupy the same kind of space. Certainly in how we associate one writer with his subject matter. I think, to be honest, having done Christmas Carol, Dickens could pretty much have shut up shop on at least on the Christmas story front. He didn't. He wrote plenty more, as you point out. But because its perfection endures. But yeah, there are many other narratives that the whole genre of the Christmas story, the ghost story at Christmas, particularly, that I think is, for me, an essential part of the Christmas experience. Yeah, definitely.
And then you've got references to Father Christmas himself in various different ways. Of course, the classic one, and I always forget it, is Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, that
Oh,
has
yes.
a Santa Claus in there papping out weapons like he's an arms dealer kind of thing, which is as one
Not
description I
quite
read
what
of
you'd
it.
expect. Ho,
Absolutely.
ho, ho,
Now,
here's a Kalashnikov.
yeah,
Use it,
exactly. Yeah.
use it wisely. Have you been a good... Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a strange thing because Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe continues to endure as a firm children's
It
favourite,
does,
but
yeah.
yet not one that necessarily we put on at Christmas time. It seems to be independent of
and
Christmas.
when you think of it, and it is, but it should be, because the whole idea of winter in Narnia
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
is very deep, and indeed, and certainly I can remember when first reading it as a child, thinking, "Ooh, this is freezing me to the bone," and not just metaphorically.
indeed. Yeah.
There's a lot going on in there that I think is, yeah. But we don't associate it specifically with Christmas.
No,
It's
it
a
seems to have
winter
its
thing.
own independent life.
Yeah.
Now, much more closely related to Christmas, but nowhere near as famous, is Terry Pratchett's Hogfather from his fantastic Discworld series, which is a personal favourite of mine. I absolutely adore his books, and I think he's a fantastic writer. And Hogfather is a barely thinly veiled version of Father Christmas, and in the story on the Discworld, if I remember correctly, Father Christmas has gone missing, and the wonderful character of Death is an absolutely brilliant character. Decides to take the Hogfather's place. If I remember correctly, the Tooth Fairy has gone missing or something
I think that's yes,
as well in that.
some,
And it's all about these myths that we tell, especially that we tell our children. These are two areas where we tell these. Am I allowed to say lies? We're not going to get children watching. I'm not going to get in trouble for spoiling things on my own, sort of saying that it's not true. But it's the idea of why do we tell these stories and why are they actually important to us in our humanity, which is one of the things that Pratchett does so fantastically. He looks at so many different aspects of human life in his various books and tells us why these things are important, including moments of history and so on.
Yeah,
Brilliantly done.
I'd certainly vote in favour of Hogfather and Pratchett as a whole. I mean, I think Pratchett, besides being immensely popular and appealing to all ages, I think he does some extraordinary things in his very considerable body of work. Apart from anything else, he's one of our great political novelists in things like Raising Steam and Going Postal.
Yes, exactly what I was thinking.
Going Postal is absolutely the greatest fictional evisceration of Thatcherism and neoliberal economics you could ever wish for. But what is, in the context of Christmas and Hogfather, what is really great at is taking, I won't just say fairy stories, but myths and legends and popular superstitions, and making them absolutely new by taking them all to Ankh-Morpork and the Discworld. And it's an absolutely titanic feat of imagination. Pratchett is and was and will be, I'm sure, for many years, an absolute titan of storytelling and fiction. He gets my vote as an essential part of Christmas.
Absolutely, and I do wonder whether, I mean, part of what we're looking at, of course, is is the Christmas Carol having been around, well, at the moment, less than 200 years, but will it still be around in another 100 years? Will it be the Hogfather instead, or something else that we just haven't even heard of now? Do we need another J.K. Rowling or whatever, something like that to happen to actually blast all these old traditions out of the water and be something brand new in 100 years?
Question. I mean, at risk of over-egging what I've been saying, I'd repeat that because the story arc and the characterisation of A Christmas Carol is so absolutely brilliantly great, it will simply populate and consume any new form that comes along for a very long time to come, I think.
This is recorded now, you realise
I know. But it does
could be a legacy either right or wrong.
It does the fundamentals of storytelling unmatchably well.
Okay,
that's the thing.
So there's one or two others, and I'm not going to talk about them long, but just to remind us that they're Little Women.
Yes,
it has great chunks to do with Christmas there, and you've got a Sherlock Holmes, The Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle, which
I
has
don't know that one.
I don't know at all either, really. So, but it apparently has all includes the Christmas turkey or the Christmas goose or whatever like that. You've basically got all the trimmings of Christmas in it, and that one does surprise me because again, obviously Sherlock Holmes is enduring. Great works of literature, just if for no other reason, just the way they've gripped our our imagination and
Yeah.
have stayed there,
Yes,
regardless of the
absolutely.
writing quality, which I think is good anyway. But there's just the stories have kept with us in the way that stories like by H. Rider Haggard haven't necessarily haven't. They're still
No,
great, but they haven't kept with the
persisted.
imagination. They haven't persisted.
Yeah, you're
But
right.
there's every version of Sherlock Holmes going still to this day,
Yeah.
and it doesn't look like that's going anywhere. And so you've got detective fiction, you've got Sherlock Holmes, the character himself, and you've got Christmas. How weird that one hasn't stayed. And again, this is one of the weirdnesses of Christmas, as we're going to continue pursuing, is why some things have stayed and other things haven't. Because I think you can argue, I absolutely agree with you about the importance of Dickens' A Christmas Carol in its perfection, but I would argue there are others that are up there with it, and there are other things that have stayed in our
And that
imagination
haven't.
that are not,
Yeah.
that are still here, even though they're not as good quality, So
that come and go,
what a strange thing we
yes,
have there.
yeah.
And one of the obvious places for definitely to have Christmas is surely poetry, and I can tell you my list is pretty much non-existent because I couldn't find any poetry worth talking
I
about at all, apart from the only thought was 12 Days of Christmas,
Yes.
which is we know as a song form really more than anything, and that has remained weird in itself because nobody's quite sure exactly where that comes from, whether it comes
What
from
it's
Catholic origins or
and
whether
what
it's to do with
really all about.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly
Yeah.
what it's supposed to mean, and
Yeah.
that's a bit peculiar. And there's one that I didn't manage to track down by I believe it's a book of well, it's a poem that's in the form of a book called Advent Calendar, I think, by Caroline Duffy, and
yeah.
it does sound, what little I've seen of it, does sound absolutely fantastic, and Duffy's just brilliant anyway.
She
But
really
other than
is,
that,
and
can't find anything worth talking about.
this is odd.
Have you got something?
Well, let me try, because I think one of the problems with Christmas poetry is that you're either landed with songs and popular doggerel, or when you look back to when people were writing serious poetry about serious things. I'm not saying that a lot of contemporary poets don't do that, but when you look back at Christmas poetry, you really have to go back to the 17th century and the metaphysical poets for the really serious stuff. And don't worry, I'm not actually going to read any out. But if you want to dip your toe into heavyweight Christmas stuff, Robert Southwell's sonnet "The Burning Babe," which you can find online very easily on some of the poetry websites. 16 lines of absolute. Sorry, it's a sonnet. In which he describes a vision of a child, and suddenly realizes, it's Christmas Day, and he packs into this very short poem a whole lot of serious big-time Christian theology on the incarnation and how it relates to redemption, and he casts it in terms of alchemy and the prevailing science of the time, about transmuting base metal into gold. It is an absolutely brilliant piece of poetry. Not something to be doing when your mind's still on the Christmas turkey and pulling crackers and having a glass of port or what have you, or settling down to the King's Speech. But it's short and it's worth giving a go. Other things, serious stuff that I'd say that are worth looking at are Milton's hymn on the morning of Christ's nativity, which is a universal, all-encompassing vision of what Christmas was about in the 17th century to a Puritan writer. Also, one of this country's 3 or 4 greatest poets. And John Donne's Nocturne on St. Lucy's Day, which technically that's a midwinter poem, not a Christmas poem, but it is in a very profound sense about renewal and rebirth and turning the corner of the year. So those are my 3 go-to Christmas poems, but they're Maybe not for the faint-hearted.
Oh,
I don't know.
indeed, yeah, yeah.
But
And you've done better than
give
me
them a
by
go.
getting those
Give them
three.
a go.
And I suspect, and indeed half hope that there's going to be people listening that you're absolutely outraged that we've not got your favourite must-have poems. So please let us know. Put it into the comments.
We'll talk about them next year.
Absolutely,
I promise.
but get them down in the comments, and we'll discuss them with you if we can as well. And I'm sure there's some great ones out there that we've completely missed, which would be fab to have a look at. And and there's definitely there's one or two I can think of with some classic lines from it, but they've just not stayed in the popular imagination, which is the ostensibly the theme of our discussion. So moving on from poems, then we've got plays.
Yes,
and you've already mentioned, of course, that Dickens' Christmas Carol has been done.
It continues to be
and continues to be done
in
all the time on the stage. In fact, I write for Northern Arts Review, and we look at theatres around in the north of England, and my reviewers have been doing Christmas Carol left, right, and centre. In fact, I did just recently. So it's and they're just completely different productions to each other as well. So you've got multiple versions of it happening all the time. That's some it's obviously something that has remained special on the stage as well. But are there any others? And the reason this got me thinking is just recently I have been reviewing Ibsen's A Doll's House at our local theatre, Keswick's Theatre by the Lake. And it was an excellent production. It was an amateur company that did it, and they did it really, really well. In case you don't know it, largely the idea is it's basically about a couple who are finally turning the corner in terms of their financial difficulties. He's now got a really good job or good position in his job, and it's Christmas time, and for once they're not going to have to worry about money. But they used to have to worry about money in the past, and that comes back to haunt them, as it were, leading to a very definite, not very nice Christmassy eventualities that come out of that. And I thought, wow, that's fascinating. I would never even have thought of, again, Ibsen, still, very, very popular for putting on in the theatres, but here's one that, hadn't really passed on my radar at all. I certainly wouldn't be thinking, Christmas isn't complete without a little bit of Ibsen in there. Wouldn't think of that.
No, I would not be thinking that, but I'll buy that as a recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, it was good. It was good. But one that I know, because we have mentioned this with each other before, but absolutely brilliant. And again, I can't believe I didn't even think about this as being related to Christmas, is James Goldman's The Lion in Winter.
Oh,
which I must confess I've never seen on the stage, but did absolutely enjoy the film. The film was fantastic.
I have to say, me too. I only know it through the film version, which is an absolute high point of 1960s sort of epic historical cinema. Peter O'Toole and Catherine Hepburn absolutely ripping it up as the King and Queen, and Anthony Hopkins is in there, and Timothy Dalton. Timothy Dalton as Richard the Lionheart, if I remember correctly. And it takes the idea that matters of great geopolitical strategy and cataclysm tend to be sorted out by families that are at each other's throats all the time, and that actually the personal is deeply political, the political is personal. And if anybody doubts the contemporary validity of The Lion in Winter, just look at what's going on in the White House at the moment, and the fact that the President of the United States is effectively running American global strategy as a personal family business venture.
Yes.
So I would, again, it's on my list of stuff to revisit for Christmas. The Lion in Winter is, apart from the fact that it has crackingly brilliant performances by really titanic, great movie stars at the top of their game, it is also, one, deeply funny. Peter O'Toole's aside about how long he's lasted, and so he's been king for, 40 years or 35 years or whatever. I've got 10 years on the Pope. And at the same time, it's also deeply, deeply. It's about deep personal trauma and turmoil and how it expresses itself politically, and it's really, I think, a great insight into families coming together, falling apart, and coming together again.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, and you definitely get that, don't you?
Cracker.
Yeah.
We've all been there at Christmas, guys.
It was EastEnders before there was EastEnders.
Indeed.
EastEnders Christmas special. Yeah. I was surprised that I'd not even thought about this until I kind of happened to research it, because I came into it because of John Barry's music. I absolutely adore John Barry's music, and it's sublime. And I know the soundtrack to the movie even better than I know the movie. I know the movie reasonably well, but the soundtrack, I know every single note of it. And of course, there's a flipping track in there which is all to the Christmas tree. The whole thing's about the Christmas tree, and it's like, nope, didn't put those two things together. So it just goes to show how we can miss things. All right, so think about musical side of things. Having segued nicely in with John Barry there, and of course you can't think of Christmas without going for that classic pub quiz gotcha of what musical did I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas come from? And of course it isn't White Christmas. Yeah. It is. Go on.
Holiday Inn.
Holiday Inn. Of course it is. Yeah. So there you go. If you didn't know that, you've got that today.
Though it was remade as White
It
Christmas.
was absolutely.
But the original was Holiday Inn. Different film, different mise en scène, the whole lot.
Yeah. So your Holiday Inn, if I remember correctly, comes from the idea it goes through several moments in the mic, several moments in time where throughout the year or something like that, doesn't it? If I remember correctly. Yeah. So Christmas is just one of the scenes.
But weirdly, for whatever reason, and I'm not sure why it persists, but it's a heart-stoppingly beautiful song. It speaks to everything that we hope and wish for in a white Christmas, I suppose, or at least it invents. You could argue it invents the idea of the white Christmas. No,
it does.
Until
we're all disappointed every Christmas day when we don't get it.
Until you first heard that, you didn't realise that what you really wanted was a white Christmas. But it fulfills the need you never realised you had.
Absolutely.
And I think that is actually quite a powerful trigger for something becoming part of our subconscious and part of our cultural undergrowth, and it persists. It's there all the time, even if we don't notice it.
Yes, indeed. And that comes nicely onto the other thing I've got on my list in terms of musical numbers. Not a musical per se, and we're not going to go down Scrooge the musical, which does exist as well. Well, the less said about that, the better, I think, possibly. But another one that, again, technically speaking, isn't necessarily Christmas. Doesn't even really. I'm trying to remember if in the graphics there is Christmas there. I'm sure there is, but certainly doesn't mention it directly. And yet, absolutely, I would say is a modern stalwart of what we think of being Christmas, and that's the Snowman. Which has been popular ever since Aled Jones, went forth with his dulcet tones, with Walking in the Air, and it has remained something that's immensely popular. For all that it's a 10-15 minute film. I think it's a bit longer than that, isn't it? It's a very short film, isn't it?
I think it was about 20 or 25 minutes.
Something like that.
It was a short. And for those who don't know the sort of exhibition history of this, Channel 4, which opened its doors and the cameras rolled for the first time in, I think at the beginning of November 1982.
Was it 82?
Yeah. And their first Christmas, they knew they needed to make a big impact, and they had a lot of big programs lined up, but in among this mix was a short animated feature based on the work of a very great British artist and storyteller, Raymond Briggs, about a small boy who makes a snowman, and this is a stepping off into a world of absolute enchantment. And guess what? It spoke to a need that none of us realised we had.
Yes,
and I spent yesterday treating my grandchild to a bit of an early Christmas present, a copy of the Snowman book, which we sat down and read. And we read it again and again and again.
Really? Oh my goodness!
And it was wonderful to see how it just absolutely caught his imagination in
I
a very, very interesting and special
I
way.
wonder if in 20 years' time there's going to be you've now kind of like condemned yourself for legal evidence for
well,
this, because part of what I found about the snowman is not dissimilar to the way people talk about Warship Down, which is like, this is not something for children kind of thing. It's just too traumatic. And I kind of found that with the snowman. I watched that because I was just that age where I was done with Christmas. You know, I knew the truth. And all that kind of stuff, and it was just a bit of a pain in the neck. I was entering into my teen years, and I remember watching it and thinking, "Oh, it's okay. There's no words. There's not really any action. The magic, which I appreciate now, was lost on me there. I was too young for that, as it were, kind of thing. But didn't matter. Get to the end, and I'm in tears.
Absolutely.
Absolute floods of tears. Oh, no, you can't do that. That can't be how it ends. It's terrible that way.
But
such a heartbreaker.
In a really good way. It's just absolutely magical. And it doesn't get shown in this cut any longer, but the original Channel 4 broadcast was topped and tailed by of all people, David Bowie as James the young boy grown up and remembering the scarf that plays that he still has, that plays such an important part in the story. And
it's probably just as well that's been cut.
Well, no, I mean, you know, absolute national treasure and icon as well. But when you think about it, it was quite a brave thing of Channel 4 to make that a central part of their Christmas broadcasting.
Yeah, totally.
At that time, and it paid off big time. We all absolutely love and adore it. And 43 years on, yes, it really is that long. It's absolutely a part of the mental and cultural furniture that we think of as Christmas. Just brilliant.
Which brings us nicely through to the last bit of looking at movies, which is where we're stretching the literary thing. But hey, they've got scripts and things like that.
Anyway. Then we'll do a bit about TV and one very specific
indeed,
TV program.
Well, the last of our list of kind of things to kind of think about, you know, over this whole idea of what makes Christmas is, of course, the movies. Now you get all your classic stuff that is well known, like Love Actually. For all the problems with misogyny that are becoming more apparent with that movie, it's still everybody just got you've got to watch, you know, the Prime Minister doing his little dance down, his little jiggle down the steps and all that kind of stuff. And you've got your classic old ones like It's a Wonderful Life, of course, and things like that. The Grinch, which my family called me a Grinch once when I refused to wear Christmas.
Humbug!
I refused to wear Christmas pajamas and things like that with the rest of the family, so they got me a little Grinch face mask instead.
I think that's probably quite justified, actually.
No, it's like, you're not going to get me in Christmas pajamas. That's not something anybody wants to see. But there you go. Anyway, so you've got things like that. Now, of course, these are classics and well known, and we can't. We've got to kind of get back to the Dickens by sort of saying you ain't seen Christmas Carol until you've seen the Muppets version of the Christmas Carol.
I certainly agree with that.
It's one of those kind of strange things that, although it's a great cracking movie and there's been umpteen movie adaptations, you say, somehow it's caught everyone's imagination. The Muppets, of all the great actors that we've had kind of like doing Christmas Carol, the Muppets, Kermit the Frog wins.
You know? Absolutely.
And why that is, I don't know, but it is very definitely. It's become an established movie to watch without a shadow of a doubt. And then you've got movies like Polar Express, which is very, very beautiful. My prediction is that I think it's already a very popular movie. It's a lovely movie, animated movie, but my prediction is that will become, you know, increasingly a kind of you must watch kind of movie for the Christmas period. But the one that has everyone going, and I know you want to say something about it, and is that kind of like the arguments rage: is it a Christmas movie or is it not a Christmas movie? Is, of course, Die Hard. And, you know, in my family, we are definitely ones who say it isn't Christmas until you've seen Hans Gruber falling from the Nakatomi Plaza. It ain't Christmas till that happens. And that's a hill I will die on, as it were. What a strange movie to consider a great Christmas classic.
Why is it a Christmas movie? Because I think there's a lot going on in that movie that is nothing to do with Christmas.
Yes. Yeah. So why is it? Yeah, I think you've got things
Well,
you want to say on this.
okay. For me, Die Hard wasn't, isn't, and I don't think ever will be a Christmas movie. I just don't get that. Let me give you my take on Die Hard. It's not a Christmas movie, people. It's a Ronald Reaganite Western, essentially. Look at when it was made, 1988, the high watermark of the Reagan presidency. And what were the two great emblematic things about Reaganism in the 80s? It was the rugged, utterly self-reliant outdoors frontier man, who relied on nobody but himself and was a law unto himself. And there were the yuppies and those who transformed our idea of work and our idea of financial success and the accumulation of wealth. And what does Die Hard do? It takes the classic Western trope of the lone tough guy who walks into town. Trouble is his middle name. Nothing is going to stop him or get in his way. And he comes up against a bunch of essentially corporate fascist terrorists who are determined to take the money and run, even if it means destroying a skyscraper in the process of making their getaway. And it absolutely collides them together in the most satisfyingly fantastic series of escapades, scenes, fights, and disasters. So it's great, but I don't get the Christmas thing about it. I mean, I should also add that there's one other very pleasing thing about it. For years, Hollywood always cast villains who talked with English accents. An upper crust English accent meant that you were a villain. So what does Hollywood do with Die Hard? It takes the greatest English character actor of the age and makes him talk in a German accent because he's the villain. What is going on there? I mean, I'm not complaining, but what is going on there? Sell me the idea of why anything to do with this, apart from the fact that it's set at a Christmas party, is about Christmas.
Well, I'll counter on that because I would say that many of the things that you were referencing with Dickens, I think is happening in the movie too. To a certain extent, it is a case of one man's redemption.
Yes.
You know, in the
Okay.
sense that Bruce Willis's
buy that.
character,
Yeah.
he's a complete jerk by his own admission at one point in the movie, and he's wrecking his marriage with his wife, with Polly. But of course, by the end of it, not only has saved her life, but at least temporarily, if you've watched the rest of the movies, temporarily saved their marriage, at least for that Christmas, if nothing else, that kind of thing. And you've also got redemption for the cop, who becomes his friend, who is living with his trauma and overcomes that, of course, at the end. Hopefully, no spoilers there. I'm sure everybody's seen the movie. If you're going to see the movie, you've probably seen it. And of course, yes, you've got your various Christmas references, including the classic "ho ho ho," lipsticked onto the t-shirt or the jumper or whatever it is that the first guy kills off. That happens too. So you got that, and on a similar line, I would also say, because certainly this affected me in this way, was that the ending when you get let it snow, let it snow, let it snow at the end, that stuck with me. When I first heard that, I was like, I need to know. I didn't know who had done that version of it. I needed that version of the song. I needed to add that to my collection. It really got to me. I don't know why. I think it was the combination of the good guy has just completely hammered all these bad guys at great personal cost and great financial cost to industry and all the rest of it. And you come out going, yes, at the end of it, it's a cracking ending, and that music just like it's perfectly done, absolutely perfectly done, and it just stuck with me. That music absolutely stuck with me.
That's interesting because again, that suggests that's meeting or feeding or meeting a need that you didn't realise you previously had.
Yes.
You thought, yes. So suddenly, it's as if this has been part of the furniture of Christmas for years without my realising it, and it will be for. Yeah, I'll buy that. I'm still not sure I'll be watching it, making a point of watching it this Christmas. But the next time I do watch it, I will buy that with that in mind.
Well, that's a nice little link to kind of like our final thoughts on all this, which is very much like, well, you've got your traditions and I've got my traditions. So like, We all have our own personal
Yeah,
traditions of Christmas, even though we are still living in a Dickens and
that's
Knickerbocker version of
yeah.
Christmas that has been with us for a very long time, and yet we've got our own personal traditions, which can be rather strange. I
Yeah.
think you've got an odd one. Tell us about that.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about our odd family tradition at Christmas. Every year on Christmas Day, our family makes a point of watching the Christmas special of Call the Midwife. Now, why do we do that? Well, number one, we always play Guess the Diagnosis, because those of you not familiar with Call the Midwife will know that, rather like Casualty in years gone by, in the early parts of an episode, two or three women will present with weird, unexplained, or mysterious circumstances surrounding their pregnancy. And we at home we play Guess the Diagnosis. Elder daughter is a doctor in a very busy obstetrics department down in Manchester. She always wins. She always gets it right from the very beginning. How is this going to play out, and what is going to happen to this particular character? Apart from that, let me sell you the idea of the value of Call the Midwife. Which has been running on BBC since, I think, 2012. It's a long-running, popular, slightly nostalgic drama. It's set in the East End, the poorest areas of the East End, as was Poplar and Stepney. You don't hear those names anymore because they became reorganised into Tower Hamlets, basically. But ever since Dickens's time, this has been. I don't know where Bob Cratchit actually lived, but I should imagine it was in either Poplar or Stepney, very close to the City of London and the poor part of the East End. And it follows the sort of year-on-year activities of an order of nuns and the local doctor who support and deliver maternity services in one of the poorest parts of the UK. And what you've got, apart from a very heartwarming series of stories, particularly in the Christmas editions of triumph over adversity, effectively, grounded in the idea of giving birth. So you're absolutely at the heart of what we're memorialising in
Good link.
Christmas
Okay, yeah.
in the first place. You've got a crackingly brilliant cast: Judy Parfitt, Vanessa Redgrave, Jenny Agutter, among many others. Okay, some of the approach to it can be rather sentimental at times. There is no doubt about that. Some of the conflicts between the nuns are a bit gentle, shall we say. I can't imagine that conflicts and arguments in real nunneries are done with anything like the politeness and comedy value that they're done in Call the Midwife. But it's worth remembering that these dramas and these stories are based on the first-hand experience and memoirs of a woman who was involved with delivering maternity services in the poorest parts of London from the 1950s through the 60s and 70s. And what you've got is effectively a social history of healthcare and medical provision during the great years of the NHS and the welfare state. And I think most people who watch Call the Midwife, certainly who watch the Christmas special, probably don't realise it, but what they're watching is the greatest single advert for the virtues of socialism and common provision that BBC television has ever produced. You cannot come out of watching an episode of that without saying, yes, this is the way things should be. It's actually yes, it's slightly sentimental, it's heartwarming, but it's also a deeply political set of dramas that are talking about community, about common provision, and about all of the things that we really need to take seriously in our country today. So for me, Christmas is very much about the values of Call the Midwife. It's about common provision. It's about welcoming the stranger and being inclusive and making sure that every member of your diverse community is valued to the max. It's brilliant. Watch it.
Well, I was going to say, I hope the BBC are not going to come knocking on your door if the viewing figures come down with people
I
are
should hope-
outraged. Socialism?
What? We didn't realise we were watching an advert for socialism. Well, you were.
I'll have
and
none of
you
that
are.
leftist rubbish. Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting. My family, we don't have any particular viewing habits. Certainly not these days for things. For our own personal traditions, I guess the one thing I do is when we're putting up the Christmas decorations, I insist on playing my Christmas CDs. I've got an Alexa that can play the music perfectly happily. No, that's no good. I don't want that. It's got to be my CDs playing the songs in the correct order
Absolutely.
that they've always been played in, and from whatever particular CDs that we've got there. So that's my personal tradition. And one my kids foisted on us for a few years as they were growing up was that they would love to get their friends to come round to watch Dad watch Home Alone. For the pure and simple reason of that I guffaw like a buffoon every time I watch Home Alone. I just love that very physical Laurel and Hardy-esque slapstick. It doesn't matter how many times I watch that movie. Every time, the bad guys take a tumble or scream in pain over something, I am just roaring. And my kids just find, they almost don't care less about the movie. They bring their friends around to just watch Dad, because it's just infectious. And apparently I just make a complete idiot of myself when watching that movie. But it's passed a little bit as they've grown up now. But during their teenage years, it was a definite must that they would have somebody come round just to watch Home Alone, to watch Dad, cry with laughter every single year as though he'd never seen the movie before. That was me.
Okay, I may have to reassess this. That sounds like
that's
a selling review.
You ain't seen Home Alone until you've seen it with me.
That's a selling review.
That's the way it is. Well, I mean, that's pretty much all we've got. I'm not sure we've actually answered what makes Christmas, but hopefully you've enjoyed us kind of exploring, all these different things, and hopefully it's given you some thoughts yourself. I'm sure there's tons of things that are on your hit list that we've completely missed. Do let us know about them. That would be cracking to hear those stories, and your own personal anecdotes of Christmas as well would be really good as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you can suggest some good, worthwhile Christmas poetry that we ought to be talking about,
because we
do.
failed on the poetry thing a little bit, really. Although you've saved us a little bit, Nick, but I was trouble on that front. One last little plug. I'm going to say we don't get paid for doing these podcasts. It's done from the bottom of our hearts, for you. But if you're still looking for Christmas gifts, we both have books which have been on display all the way along in a very non-Christmassy kind of way. My book's got absolutely nothing to do with Christmas. The Pukur, it's set in Bangladesh. Nick, you want to say about yours?
The Judas Case, the perfect solution to what to buy the historical fiction lover in your life if you can't find anything for Christmas for him or her. Not specifically a Christmas book, more an Easter book, but it's murder, betrayal, and mayhem in first century AD Jerusalem.
There you go. If you're not going to do your Sherlock Holmes Christmas edition, you can at least kind of get a nice detective novel from Nick's wonderful hand. It's a very good book. It is very good. I've read it, and it is absolutely cracking.
Is the Procure, and I've read that too.
Getting on nicely. Well, make sure there's links on the website. But we had to throw that in. They'll make nice Christmas gifts for the book reader in your family. But that's it from us. It only left to be said, Merry Christmas to you and a Happy New Year. And hopefully we'll be back next year with more podcasts.
And a very Merry Christmas to you from me too, and a Happy New Year. And we will indeed be back in 2026 with more podcasts about fiction and books.
Absolutely. Maybe some poetry in there as well.
Poetry as well, who knows.